appreciate my experience of being a controller, what attributes I think are necessary as a controller. We'll talk about the training at the school a bit, and then I have some YouTube presentations which I think are really cool. And then I'll talk about my journey in my career. Does it sound okay? Cool. So, whoops. So, tell me, what do you think air traffic control is? Go ahead.
I'm just also guess like maybe to lead the like the arrivals of, or like departures of airplanes and where they should stop, which like air runway they should land on.
Yep. Yeah. It's a lot of it. Is it just arrivals and departures?
No, I think also in mid-air maybe.
Yeah, exactly. So why do you think we need air traffic control? It's a pretty simple answer. Yep.
So that airplanes don't collide in the air.
Correct. We don't want airplanes crashing. Where do we work?
There's sometimes like large towers.
Excellent, yeah. Sometimes in large towers, yeah. It's not all air traffic control is in a tower. We also have control centres as well. We'll get into that in a bit more detail too. And so, what do you think we do to keep those aeroplanes apart?
We offer them different altitudes and different headings to change the direction and keep a distance, vertical distance from the aircraft.
Good. These guys are smart. Excellent. Okay. Sorry, Christina.
Yes. I'm going to actually move over there so that I can help you.
That would be fabulous. Thank you. So I want to go to the PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah. So we can minimize this one and then let's see where the other one is. Is it this one?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so this is the formal Deutsche Flugsicherung presentation. Okay, so here's a map of the world, as you can see. And all of these little dots are aircraft at one particular point in time. So all of those airplanes have to be separated. All these dots out here, out in the ocean, this is done through satellite communications and frequency, HF frequencies, as well as satellite communications as well. And then, but we'll get into that in a bit more detail shortly. And I'll have a YouTube presentation of this picture shortly, showing the actual movement of those aircraft. This is basically every single route in the world, aircraft flying on those routes throughout the 24 hours a day. Yeah? Pre-COVID. So, here's where I'm from. Here's Germany. And so Germany owns this piece of airspace. France owns another little piece of airspace, but yeah, we'll get into that again shortly as well. By the way,
I don't know.
what have we done? Okay, here we go. I think that's right.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so Germany's airspace is all of this here, and Germany's responsible for all aircraft from the ground up to 66,000 feet up in the air. Then the next country is responsible for their piece of airspace. All of this airspace here is then divided into another little piece, so there's like three-dimensional pieces of a puzzle, and every air traffic controller looks after that little piece of area using a specific frequency. So every time an aircraft is in that area, I'm responsible for making sure it doesn't hit anybody else. So we have towers in all of these places around the country, some obviously much bigger than others. And then we have a control centre for upper airspace in Karlsruhe, And then there's for the lower airspace areas in Langen, Munich, Bremen. Pretty sure that's all it. Okay, so we look after every single aircraft, from the little Cessna 172 to the A380. Yeah, everybody's controlled. And there's different types of airspace. So the guy who sits in the tower is actually only looking after the aircraft that are on the runway, so departing aircraft and landing aircraft. And as soon as the aircraft goes off that runway, he's not responsible for it anymore. The next controller is. And then we move up into approach and departures control, who looks after this sort of area, and then upper airspace. And these guys are about managing to get the aircraft to their destinations. So when you were saying we keep aeroplanes apart, every single aircraft effectively has a bubble around it. And we just make sure those bubbles don't touch. Those bubbles are laterally 5 nautical miles and vertically 1,000 feet, or 300 metres, 9 kilometres. Out in this area where this little aeroplane showed up, this is called uncontrolled airspace, where the aircraft are allowed, have a little bit more flexibility with what they're allowed to do. It's not as defined. A controller doesn't say, you must turn here and do this and climb here. They will do what they want to do and tell us what they're doing, and then we tell them about the other traffic around. So it's a little bit different.
Can we ask questions in between?
Oh yes, please. Please, go ahead.
Well, my first question is 300 meters.
Doesn't seem like very much, is it?
No, because when I think about with my navigational device in the car, if it says 300 meters, I can see that. So 2 airplanes can see each other when they're passing on top of each other.
Absolutely, yeah. And if you have 2 aircraft that are opposite direction to each other that are just 1,000 feet apart, it's actually really difficult for them to gauge visually that aircraft is actually at a different level. So they rely on us, the computer, they rely on us doing our job properly, and the information that the aircraft, the flight management system actually shows them.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Where are you? Or are you going to go into that? Like,
Yes.
because you said that this person gets the aircraft here, and then the next one gets the aircraft here.
Yeah.
Are you going to get into that?
Sure.
Okay. Because I'm curious where you fall in this.
Yes. I've never worked in a control tower. I've always worked in the control centre.
Okay.
Primarily in upper airspace control. Yeah. It's a very different type of job.
Yeah, that's what I'm so fascinated by right now, is that even within the airfields, each job is different.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have the centres where it's basically a big room like this, but just rows and rows of computers. We have the main screen where the aircraft are displayed. We have a lot of information around the surroundings. We have another screen that gives us contact with the other controllers that are around us. And what else can I tell you? It's technical, but once you get to know what you're doing, it's very simple. Any job the same. You get trained well to actually to do it. Yeah, so sorry. And the tower controller, all they're doing is controlling the movements on the runway, and there's also another controller called the surface movement controller, and that controller is simply managing where the aircraft are on the taxiways to make sure that they're in a reasonable, an appropriate line to allow them to depart efficiently. Can you imagine, for example, this is a bit extreme, it doesn't actually happen, but just to demonstrate the point. If an A380, quite a big aeroplane, was lined up to depart, and we had a little Cessna 172 departing afterwards, you think there might be a problem? So if the A380 departs, it's got all that power to get off the ground, there's a thing called wake turbulence that comes off the aircraft. So we don't want a little Cessna 172 to be the next aircraft that's going to be in line behind him, because as soon as that aircraft gets within that wake, it will flip over. So if there's an A380 and then a 757 and then a 737, and then we go down in the sizes to a Cessna 172, it's a bit more reasonable.
That's air turbulence?
Sorry?
Why is that
Yeah,
air turbulence?
yeah, it's called wake turbulence when it's on the ground, and air turbulence in the air. Okay, so this is what the centre at Karlsruhe looks like. Every day you come into work and you log on, I'm here, you check the books to see if there's been any changes. You go and look for where your team is, and there's a specified list about when you're going to be operating. You have a particular area that you're licensed to work in, and then you just work with your team to manage that area. You usually work for about an hour and a half, then somebody takes over from you. You have a break for about half an hour, then come back again. So your whole day is quite regulated, but you do get quite nice breaks in between. Yeah.
And you need those frequent breaks for concentration?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially if you've been really, really concentrating. I've found after about 2.5 hours, you just find your decision-making capability dropping dramatically, and you can actually feel it start happening, and you've got to actually be aware of your capacity to start recognising, I'm making a lot of mistakes now that I'm picking up, but if I'm making mistakes, somebody needs to come and take over, and there's always somebody there to take over from them. Okay, so from a tower, we usually use visual control, which is the controller actually seeing where the aircraft is. There's obviously times, especially in Europe, where the weather is so bad that they can't actually see the aircraft, so we actually have what's called surface movement radar, where they'll actually be able to see the aircraft without being able to visually see them, and then move them around that way. And yes, so it's all about just the landing and arriving aircraft. So the training. You have to have year 12. You can't be older than 24 years old when you start the training. They won't accept trainees after 25. And the reason for that is that your ability to learn and your ability to develop the quick skills diminishes dramatically after 25. You still get to work for much longer than that, but developing those skills is really important by the time in that age. You have to have English, common European framework, but also there's an international organisation called the International Civil Aviation Organisation, and they specify a certain level of English proficiency before you can start the job. And then you have to be medically fit as well, and you're required to do a medical test that's the same standard as a commercial pilot, and you have that test every 2 years, and then after the age of 40, you will get there, every year after that, just to make sure that you're still physically coping with the stress of the job. And we'll get into the strengths a little bit more in my presentation shortly. Oops. What have I done?
Oh, I think that you're all set. I was going to say, if you touch the button above, I think sometimes it can do that.
Okay, sorry.
No worries.
All right, so if you were wanting to become an air traffic controller, the application process is quite long, and I have been advised that if you were in year 12, you'd want to apply for it at the beginning of the year, before you finished year 12, if you're wanting to start the year after. There's different times that they take courses in over the year, so you may not start straight after school. It might happen, but there may every 3 to 4 months after that they take courses in. So there's an online questionnaire that you have to do. If you pass that, then they'll invite you to come along to a selection process in Hamburg, where they'll give you more tests and interviews and Yes, they're just looking for the different attributes that they want to see in an air traffic controller. Then you have an interview and your medical checkup, and if you pass all of those, you then come along to Langen, where I am, and we'll talk about that a bit more later.
Is there a psychological component to the
Yeah.
medical?
Not the medical, but the tests you do at Hamburg. Yeah.
Like psycho assessments.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit different now, but when I went through, we had like, I think it was a 3-hour exam, and we had 3 different tests in front of us. One was about spatial awareness, like putting shapes together. One was about English comprehension, and another one was, I can't remember what it was, but they would time us. And so we'd be doing one test for 15 minutes, and a bell would go off and they'd say, okay, do this one. And then they'd stop us, okay, do this one for 3 hours. So it was all about the ability to change focus and still be able to interpret and get correct answers out of the questions. So the training at the beginning, obviously, you have a lot of theoretical training. You have to know quite a lot. You have to know those rules really well. And then we have, you get split up into particular areas. They'll decide if you're going to a tower, if you're going to the lower airspace, if you're going to the upper airspace, and then your training diversifies from there for those specific disciplines. And then once you get through all of that, you go out into the field for on-the-job training, and that takes another 12 to 18 months. And that on-the-job training means that you will have an assigned air traffic controller who's qualified, watching every move you make. You get to control real aeroplanes, but there's somebody watching everything you do just in case you make a mistake, and they will interject if you've made an error, and that's part of the learning process. Until the point where you get licensed, and then you're allowed to do it on your own. That's a very scary moment, that one.
What school subjects prepared you the best for this test? I mean, is this very scientific or very mathematical? Or?
They want you to have done mathematics, but it's very simple maths and basic physics. You know, speed equals distance over time. And being able to do those calculations really quickly is very important. Knowing what the ground speed is, what the difference between the ground speed of 2 aircraft, and whether they'll get closer or whether their distance is getting further apart from each other. So it's very quick maths. And I wouldn't say I was great at maths, but I like that sort of quick mathematics. I'm not the best at calculus or anything like that. Okay, so if you want any more information about a career in Deutsche Flugsicherung, just go to the website and there's heaps of information there about it. Okay, now how do I get back to my other presentation? Thank you. Okay, so we saw this in the previous presentation, but as I said, it's a different type of air traffic control for the different type of airspace, and obviously it's 3-dimensional. Well, actually it's 4-dimensional because we've got lateral separation, vertical separation, time, etc. One, I can't remember. Longitudinal, of course. How stupid. So aircraft in front, obviously, aircraft around you, and the vertical separation, and then time as well. Okay, so as you saw in that previous picture, is obviously air traffic has to be managed around the entire world, and every country, every piece of airspace in the world is divided up into different pieces, and different countries are responsible for that particular area. And so I'll just give the example of Australia because that's what I know best. Here we have Australia, and it actually goes from here over to the other side there. Oh man,
Yeah, I think it's. Oh, look at that.
And all the way down across the Indian Ocean and down across the Antarctic. So Australia is actually responsible for about 11% of the Earth's surface.
Wow.
The type of air traffic control out here is very different to what you do over the land, because you can't see the aeroplanes out here. It's called procedural control, and it's based on the navigation capabilities of the aircraft and their ability to speak to us via either HF frequencies, or we effectively get text messages from them to separate them. And so, of course, because we don't have as good equipment to separate them, the separation standards are just that much bigger out here. So, you know how I was saying we use 5 miles in 1,000 feet? Out in the oceanic airspace, we actually use 100 miles, or depending on the equipment, could be 50 nautical miles. So it all depends on the aircraft. So I used to actually control this airspace for about 5 years, and there'd be days where you'd start work and an aircraft would contact you here, and when you're leaving work, the aircraft, you'd be transferring the aircraft to the next frequency. So you're looking after him for that entire 8-hour period. So Germany's up here. So you're very lucky here, because the only separation standards you have to learn here is 5 miles in 1,000 feet. Whereas I had to learn a lot. Okay, so those PowerPoints.
Oh, did you want to look at the videos?
Yes, please.
Perfect. So go here.
So that one.
Sure. And you obviously want to start from the beginning, I imagine. And then I just have to put the sound on. Let's start there first. I don't know how loud it's going to be. Should it already be?
Yeah, I don't think this one's got sound.
Oh, okay. So let's start it over. I'll pause it, and then I can do full view.
All right. So, just to give you a little bit of an appreciation, America's pretty busy.
Wow.
So there's all different routes, as obviously you can see across the Atlantic Ocean. Very busy. Down here in Australia, the east coast is very busy. So there's different routes that have a lot more traffic than other routes. So, and this is showing you, I don't know if you can actually see the difference in colour, but that's daylight, nighttime coming across. So obviously, as you could see that at nighttime there's not quite as much traffic, and then it increases during the daytime. Look how busy it is in Europe. Then as the night goes by, the amount of traffic diminishes. Anyway, I thought it was pretty cool.
I'm fascinated.
Why does, I mean, this might be silly, but why does it diminish at night? I know that people don't want planes flying overhead at night.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have to be able to see, it really doesn't matter whether that airplane flies in the dark or in the light, right?
Yeah, true. Obviously there is some travel done at night time, especially across the Atlantic, transatlantic, and from Australia over to here and all that sort of stuff. It's just, you'll probably, well, a lot of people don't want to be, there's primarily people travelling just as tourists and stuff like that. They don't generally want to be travelling in their own countries at night time. Yeah.
Is it also harder for pilots at night, or does it not really matter?
Well, they're mainly relying on their instruments, so it depends. Yeah.
Question.
Hi, go ahead.
Yeah. What is the country that has the most planes fly over every day?
The US.
Yeah.
Hands down. Yeah. But I think Europe's doing pretty well in comparison, don't you?
Yeah, isn't Frankfurt one of the busier airports in the world?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I've got nothing else for you, but yeah.
Yeah, okay. And then,
yeah, if we go back to...
So, do you want to go back to the presentation?
Yeah.
This one?
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Do you think anybody can be an air traffic controller?
No.
What percentage of the population do you reckon could actually do the job?
Probably like 1 or less than.
That's pretty good. They reckon that 2% of the population has the attributes that you need to do the job. Go ahead.
Question. Do you have to have really good eyesight to do this job?
No. They do tests, but they simply require eye correction if you've got bad eyesight.
Oh.
Yeah.
So wait, I'm sorry.
Yes.
So if you didn't have the eyesight they wanted, it wouldn't be a deal breaker. They would just be like, go get laser
Go and get
treatments.
glasses or whatever.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's very flexible.
Yeah. So this is not to say that air traffic controllers are really smart. It's just a different type of skill set. It's different attributes that you have in your personality that mean that you are suited for this type of job. Air traffic control is definitely not rocket science. It's not medicine. It's a lot of common sense, and it's all about knowing the rules, following those rules, and being able to make decisions based on those rules quickly, and being able to assess that decision and fixing it if you recognise that you've made an error quickly. So, what kind of traits do you think we need?
Deal with stress.
Deal with stress, absolutely, yes.
Communication.
Able to communicate, absolutely. Nice and clearly.
Are there sometimes problems with like pronunciation?
Absolutely. And one of the biggest problems is pronunciation, particularly because English is not the first language for a lot of people. And so we're required to speak in aviation language. So you will learn phraseologies on how to get a message across that everybody's supposed to learn, so that people who do not have English as their first language can expect, if they're getting this particular instruction, it should sound like this. So they'll know what sort of direction that they're expected to go in. Yeah. Okay.
Did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just had a question. So basically, it's kind of also obviously basing off the fact that you have to make a lot of decisions quickly. I'm guessing you have to be a very kind of like decisive or in a way straightforward person. You can't start lingering for minutes on what to do.
Yeah. You have to look at the situation. We at this training college, one thing we stress with our students is, okay, you've come up with one decision. If that one doesn't work, what's your plan B? What's your plan C? What's your plan D? So you get trained to figure that out. But you need to be able to go through your decision-making process quickly and decide what's my best course of action here, and act on it quickly.
It's also kind of seen in the tests right in the beginning where you have 3 hours with a bunch of different questions.
Yeah. Okay, so obviously, as we said, you need to be able to make decisions and be confident that that decision that you've made is correct, or you need to be able to reassess that very quickly and recognise very quickly, I've made a mistake, because we're all human, there's no denying it, we do make mistakes. And you need to know how to fix that mistake very quickly as well. You have to have an attention to detail, very important. If you give an instruction to an aircraft, for example, Speedbird 132 descend flight level 280, and he responds, flight level 260, Speedbird 182, you need to be able to make sure that you hear that he read back something incorrect to you, and you respond, correction, Speedbird 182, descend flight level 280, and then stress that it's 280 and fix the situation. You need to be able to multitask, and that's what I was talking about, that test that we did. We're going from different types of decision making and assessment easily, yeah? Spatial awareness is very important. If you can't read a map, it's probably not the job for you. Okay, we need to be able to stay calm under pressure and deal with stress, and we've already talked about that a little already. But I I find it funny, a lot of people have said to me when I've met them, it's like, wow, you don't seem stressed. Isn't air traffic control a stressful job? And my response to them is, well, do you want a stressed air traffic controller? And yeah, obviously the answer is no. So we do go through stress, there's no denying that, and it can be a stressful job, but sometimes it's not. And so you just need to be able to, when it is getting stressful, there are a lot of techniques that you have to start being disciplined about using. It's like taking that extra second to make a decision, breathing deeply. It's really important to just keep breathing. Because when you start when you do start getting nervous, your breath starts getting a little bit shorter, which then affects your capacity to make decisions as well. Said it twice, I'm sorry.
Well, that's how
no
important
attention
it
to
is.
detail. Okay, know the rules, and that's what you come to Langen for. Sorry, to Langen for. You need to know the rules back to front, inside out, and upside down. Yep. And then you need to be able to follow them. And you need to know how to follow them. Yeah, and that's what the training is all about. The resilience is incredibly important, especially when you are in a difficult situation. It might not have been your fault, you might not have made the error, the pilots have made the error, there's really bad weather around, and you just need to stick it out. You can't go, I don't like this anymore, I'm going. You need to, of course, call other people to help you out, but you need to just keep going until you've got through the problem. Yeah?
That's true, because in a normal job, you could just be like, I don't really like this conversation right now. I'm going to go away. But you really can't do that.
No, not at all.
I never thought of that element.
No. Think so?
Is there a specific situation that you have in mind where you wanted to back out, but you've had to make tough decisions?
Well, yeah. It happens a lot. There's situations where I had extreme weather and aircraft deviating 100 miles off their track, and you've got to try and get them back, and especially with weather, every aircraft wants to find the same hole in the weather, so they're all diverting around off their tracks. Nothing's normal anymore, and all of those aircraft want to be effectively at the same level, at the same place, at the same time. And it's just about managing and staying calm and just continue plodding through and just getting to the other side of it. Yeah.
Do you sometimes have to extend the flight times so that you can redirect them to different routes and stuff?
The pilot is always ultimately responsible for his aircraft, so he would know. Every aircraft has to plan for an alternate depending on the weather, but he would know what his circumstances are, and if he needed to divert to another sector, to another aerodrome, he would tell us that, and then we'd have to organise to reroute him to that particular place instead. Yeah.
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
So let's say you go through that kind of circumstance, and then the problem is solved and the things are done. Is that an example of when, because I can't imagine going through that and then having to deal with the next plane. Is that a situation where you would say, I need 10 minutes and just kind of clear your head?
It all depends on the situation.
Okay.
If it's affected you so much, you could say, I need to get out of here, and there'd be somebody to come and take over. Having said that, it might take them a while to get there to take over from you, so you just need to keep plodding through until there is the capacity to do that. Yeah. When there's a situation where if something has gone wrong, because it does go wrong, and it starts playing on your mind. You think, oh, I'm okay, but then you start replaying that scenario in your head, and it starts diverting your attention from what you're actually doing. It's important to put your hand up again and say, I need a break, I need to get out of here. Yep.
So, what do you mean with going wrong?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
What do you mean that things can go wrong? Do planes then clearly miss?
It does happen. Accidents should not happen, but situations do. Humans are have flaws and they make mistakes. And so it does not matter what situation, nothing is perfect, okay? So we actually have this, this model that we use for safety. Safety is the most important thing, but we have to have, there's a certain risk factor, and it's called the Swiss cheese model. And so you know what a piece of Swiss cheese looks like with the holes in it and all that, and they're all different sizes as you slice through it, and you keep slicing it, and when you slice first there's a big hole, and then the second is slightly smaller, etc. So all the procedures and practices that we put in place are all aimed at avoiding a error shooting through to the point of actually having an accident. Okay, so we have procedures that make that hole smaller, and so an error might get to a certain point, but the procedures and practices that we've put in place stop it from going any further. So we've stopped an accident happening by having these particular rules or practices that we follow. Does that make sense? But for example, if I gave an instruction to an aircraft and he's got to read that information back to me, and if he read it back to me correctly but entered incorrect information into his aircraft, we could have a situation where two aircraft get too close to each other. But then the aircraft have what's called TCAS, which is Traffic Collision Avoidance System on board, which is a type of radar. So if I get my job wrong, or if the pilot does something wrong, there's another buffer to avoid an accident happening. So there's lots of these different technological buffers, procedural buffers to stop what you're describing happen. Yeah? Does that make sense? Yes?
What about artificial intelligence? It seems like exactly humans are not flawless, artificial intelligence maybe less so. So is there a tendency to use more and more, and then soon there will be no human beings in the...
I do believe that will happen at some point, but it's 40, 50 years away at least. So you'll get a career out of air traffic control before artificial intelligence takes over.
Well, why is that so? It's interesting. So how human beings are still better?
There's too many variables that occur that the computers can't be programmed to manage every single variable that occurs at the moment. Okay, this is one. This one, I believe, is one of the most important things that you need. You need to have the humility. You have to have belief in yourself that you can do this job, and you demonstrate that when you go through the training school and all that. But you also need to be humble enough to recognize that I am a human, I will make mistakes. And you need to be able to, first of all, if you've made a mistake and a serious error has happened, you need to be able to put your hand up straight away and say, I've made an error here. It may not be your fault in the end, because it's really important for them to be able to identify when errors happen so that it can be reviewed, and then the authorities decide whether, well, maybe it was an issue with one of the rules that we had in place that caused that error to happen, for example. So that every time an error happens, and they do happen, there's no denying it, it's reviewed and determined whether it was you just made a silly boo-boo, or it's actually something intrinsic in the system that needs to be fixed. Definitely need to be assertive. You need to know that you can do this job. You have to have a personal belief that you have the capacity to manage this traffic. You will have people question you all of the time, and you need to be able to respond to them and go, I'm doing it this way because of, and you have to be able to justify why you're doing it. There will be times, and it's happened to me too, where I have been involved in an incident and your confidence level just plummets, and it takes quite some time to actually pull yourself up, pull your socks back up, to be confident again that no, I can do this job. I have been trained properly to do it. I can do this job still. Yeah. Definitely need to be a good team player. It's really, really important to be able to work with your colleagues, work with people you don't necessarily like that much personally, but put that aside and you work together. It's a lot more fun too when you work together. You won't be hand-fed absolutely everything as a trainee. You do need to, obviously, it's really important when you're actually out there as a controller to be able to do the job on your own with confidence. So as a trainee, you will be expected to do a lot of work yourself. Now this is really important. We all have the tendency, especially you girls, to always say yes. If somebody asks you to do something, but it's so important to be able to know when is the right time to say, no, I can't do this, or no, I don't accept this. Yeah. And of course, English is very important. Okay, so there is a lot of theory. You'll have about 18 months. The really good thing is, I'll get onto this more later, you get paid while you're training. This is good. A lot of theory. You have to know the rules back to front. There's a lot of simulation training, so we have what looks like a control centre, and you will be trained with a coach watching every move you make and helping you, guiding you to do it better. Yeah. And that's about putting that theory into practice. So from now on, you cannot just cram for an exam and then forget everything. It's really important that the theory you know how to actually put that into practice.
There's a question.
Yep.
Is the theory on like a website or in like books?
So that theory is from when you're sent to the training school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
yeah.
Like, is it when you study for it, right? Where do you get the information? Like, do they give it to you, or?
Oh yeah, yeah. You'll be provided with everything. Oh. Yeah. We don't expect you to find all the rules, etc. we will help you out there. Yeah. So you had to spend about a year at the academy and then 2 years out in the field before you're actually let loose to control aeroplanes on your own. It's pretty much like a degree, isn't it? Like university sort of time. And from that 2% of people that get selected, about 70% of those people actually get through all of the training to actually get their licenses. Okay, so it's a long road, but it's a road worth pursuing, if you ask me.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you show the person the traits that you need and the skill sets and everything, when you were exploring this career path, did you find that, I mean, obviously you made it out of the 2%, but was there a particular requirement that you needed, whether it was the spatial intelligence or the resilience or the stress, that you had to really work hard on to master?
I don't know.
Okay.
It was funny, when I went through, we had people from all walks of life, people straight out of high school, people with physics degrees, people with a business degree like myself. And to look at all of us, you would think, what is it about us that has actually meant that we can come and train to do this particular job? And I've never figured it out.
That's fascinating.
I have a quick question because you've mentioned several times how stressful the job can be. And I mean, judging from, there are sometimes failures or situations where you kind of lose all of your confidence. I'm curious too, how many people, is it normal for people to kind of work in the job for 5 to 10 years and at some point the stress does kind of create big issues and they have to drop out and go to another career because they can't really handle it or like come back in?
Yeah, yes, but it all depends. There are people there who spend their entire careers from 21 years old until they retire at 60 years old, and they've never had that experience. So it really does depend on the individual. I was telling Christina before, I decided to leave in my late 40s because I started finding I could still do the job, still loved doing the job, but I found the shift work started really knocking me around a lot, and I felt that I spent all of my days trying to recover from the last lot of shift work, getting myself physically ready to go back to work again that I found that I didn't want to do this anymore, which is why, I mean, there's still other avenues that you can do, like training. Yeah.
Because I'd imagine some people might think that they're prepared or might even pass a psychological test, but once actually put into practice, they might find it all way too overwhelming.
Yeah, it does happen. I can't say it doesn't. Yeah.
It happens actually a lot with psychologists and counselors where it depends on how much trauma you've seen. It's actually there's a lot of skill sets that are similar, and what a lot of counselors will do is take a year or take 6 months, but then they do end up going back in it in some way, or they go back to training other people on how to become a counselor. Because mentally challenging jobs like that, you really have to focus on self-care, taking care of yourself.
Absolutely.
Could you maybe also, in the end, share with us some 2 practical cases, use something from your experience to illustrate this profession with? Because you mentioned that you were involved yourself in an incident.
Do you want an example of an incident?
On the other side, no, like the errors or something which led, or how you dealt with this, maybe something funny just to make it, like more.
Can I think about that for a while? I have a few situations in my head, but they're not funny.
Your choice.
Yeah, I'll think about it. Can you remind me again later? Yeah, I'll keep going for the moment.
Do you have 2 sessions?
Yes, we have 2 sessions.
Break into the session.
Yes. The students have it goes till 3, but they have a break in between, so you can let us know. It's a sort of nowish wherever you want to.
Give me 5 minutes and then we'll have a break? Yeah. Great. Okay, so just in case you're interested, here in Germany, next year we're planning for 144 students. I know that's a little bit early for you guys. But the year after, all depending on how this COVID thing's going, we might have 144 students, more likely 80 students. But even with this situation at the moment with the COVID debacle, at the moment, well, I think it's up now a bit, but 2 months ago, there was a 98% drop in air traffic. So absolutely unheard of. And there's a lot of air traffic controllers sitting around thinking, what do? I don't know. They're working like 16 hours a month at the moment. So very frustrating, but it's not going to be like that all of the time, and they are projecting that the traffic will increase over the next couple of years again. There's people retiring, so they still do need air traffic controllers to come in. Yeah.
What percentage of normal have we reached now? I mean, it was 98% a couple of months ago. What is it now?
I'm guessing, I think it's about 10% now. It's not going to get up more than 50% before the end of the year. They're projecting about 70% by middle of next year, and it will take quite a bit of time to get from that 70% back up to, even if they do get back up to what we were at before this. Yeah, I mentioned that courses start throughout the year, and the really nice thing is that the class is only 16 maximum. Sometimes it's just 8 people, so it's a nice little group of people. You really get to know your colleagues really well. You need to study together and work together to get through. It's a good environment. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so maybe do need more than 5 minutes. Okay, we'll get onto this afterwards. Have a break?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so we can continue on. The things that I think are good about air traffic control. The work is incredibly satisfying. It's just a great feeling to know that you've got all of these problems. Some people describe it as 3-dimensional chess, and you just need to figure it out. And at the end of figuring out that complicated problem, it's like, cool, I did that. You do get to work independently a lot, which is nice. You don't always have somebody looking over your shoulder. You get to work with lots of different people, which is positive, as opposed to just working with 5 people in an office, for example.
How many people work in a center or a tower?
All depends. I think in Karlsruhe, which is the upper airspace control center, I think there's about 600 people. You don't work with all of those people. You will work with your small team of 15 probably, and then it's a 24-hour shift cycle, so you won't see all of those people during that time, but there's a variety of people around all the time. Like I said before, you get paid while you train. It's always a positive. This is one thing that's fantastic. You walk in, you do your job, you walk out again, and as long as nothing has gone wrong, your time outside of work is yours, which is really good.
Which is different from teaching.
You do get to earn an above average income, and Deutsche Flugsicherung, particularly as an employer, is fantastic. The conditions that you have are just, I find, mind-blowing. It's really impressive. There you go, excellent work conditions. And you have a minimum of 6 weeks holiday every year.
Oh, wow.
Which is very nice. And job security, so Deutsche Flugsicherung is a company owned by the government. So provided that you do your job properly, you do have a job for life. This is not a type of job where you would choose to just do it for a couple of years. This is a job that you would generally, unless you decide this is not for me anymore, obviously you choose to leave, but it is very satisfying, you get trained very well for it, and it's usually something that people do for their entire careers. Yes?
On an average day, how many hours do you work?
So I'd have an almost 8-hour shift, but of that I'd probably work 6 hours. Okay. Maximum. Anybody else? Okay. Here's the point we were talking about before, that you have to be resilient. You don't get to stop when things are going a little bit pear-shaped. You just need to keep pushing, keep pedaling, and get through the problem. Yeah. Shift work is tough, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but here in Germany there is a little bit more flexibility as far as you do get a little bit more choice about when you get to, what shifts you do choose to do. And you get compensated for doing the shifts that people don't like doing. You do have to work on public holidays, so sometimes you will not be able to go to Christmas. And as we said, things do go wrong, so it can be stressful. And you may have to move away from home if you, I know in Australia it's not that uncommon too. Like I grew up in Brisbane, I live down in Melbourne. That's because that's where my work is. But as far as I understand, it's not that common to move very far away from where you grew up. Yeah, is that true? Well, that's what one of my colleagues told me.
Yeah, the problem is that this is, you're looking at your highly mobile kids.
Yeah, good point.
So
okay, disregard this comment.
I don't know. I think in Germany that's generally the case. Right. But most of you, how many of you have lived in more than 2 countries?
Cool.
How many have lived in more than 3 countries?
Wow.
Okay.
Impressive.
And they're only 15.
I know, it's amazing.
That's impressive. Okay, so I'll just show 2 of these videos. The first one here is one Cornelia particularly wanted me to show you. And this is a situation that happened in Australia at a small aerodrome, and I am incredibly proud of this air traffic controller. He did the most extraordinary job. It was just, he just stayed calm. The situation, I'll just tell you a little bit about it. This trainee pilot was on his first flight and his instructor lost consciousness. Okay?
Oh God. My heart just sunk.
Yep.
Okay. So we start from the beginning, right?
Emergency. This is Tango Foxtrot Romeo. Can you hear me? Tango Foxtrot Romeo, Jericho Tower. I can hear you. What's the problem? Tango Foxtrot Romeo. Do you know how to operate the aeroplane? Very, very light. This is my first lesson. At the moment, are they unconscious? He's leaning over my shoulder. I'm trying to keep him up, but he keeps falling down. The first thing we're going to do is make sure that the wings stay level and that you keep consistent speed and consistent altitude. Tango Foxtrot Romeo, can you see any obvious landmarks? For example, the Kwinana Freeway, can you see that out the window at all?
Yes, I can see Thompson Lake.
We can see you out the window, so we're tracking where you are at the moment. You're doing a really great job. I know this is very stressful, but you're doing an amazing job. We're going to help you get down to the ground, okay?
Copy that. Thanks for your help.
Alright, that's what we're here for. Tango Foxtrot Romeo, have you landed any aircraft before by yourself or with someone else at the controls with you?
No, I haven't.
Tango Foxtrot Romeo, can you tell me how your instructor's doing at the moment? How's he looking?
No, he hasn't woken up. I've just tried to lift his head back up just to check to see how he's going, but he's not responding.
Tango Foxtrot Romeo, and you're doing a really great job. Everything that you're doing is really, really good. Your turns are really nice and gentle. You're holding your altitude really well. Everything that you're doing is spot on. You're doing a great job. Keep it up.
Thank you. I hope they don't think I'm paying for this flight.
Yeah, no, if they make you pay for it, I'll pay for it with my own wallet. Tango Foxtrot Romeo, just a little bit more engine power, please. You're dropping a little bit too low there. That's great. Just a little bit more power. Let's try and land it on the next one, hey? That was perfect. Everything you did there was perfect. We're going to land it on the next one, yeah?
Copy that. Tango Foxtrot Romeo.
You got this, mate. You're doing really, really well. Tango Foxtrot Romeo, we're going to do exactly what you just did before. This time we're going to land it, okay? Nose down towards the threshold, nose down. Nose down more, nose down more, nose down more, nose down more, nose down more. Perfect, perfect. Power, power off, power off, power off, power off. Raise the nose gently. Raise the nose gently, hold it on, hold it, hold it, hold it, hold it, hold it right there. This is perfect. Hold it, very gently start braking now. Gently start braking now, and you're down on the ground. You did it, mate. Well done. That's amazing. You've done so well. Just hold it right there. You've done absolutely an amazing job. Well done. Tango Foxtrot Romeo, congratulations on your first solo.
Was your heart in your heart pumping? There he is. And got to the end of my business degree, didn't enjoy doing it at all, but thought I'm going to get that piece of paper, and I'm really glad I did that. It was really important that I got that piece of paper, but I certainly got to the end of it and thought, this is not my cup of tea, I need to do some other study. And I was always interested in aviation, and so I saw a job in the newspaper, come and be an air traffic controller, and I thought, oh, I like aviation, that sounds interesting. And a family friend was an air traffic controller, and so he took me to the control centre, and like Cornelia said, I walked into that room and it was electrifying. It was like so many decisions being made. It was so exciting, and I thought, yeah, this is what I want to do, and I've never regretted that decision. It's been a great job, and it's brought me to Frankfurt. So I worked in quite a few different areas in Australia, en route, airspace, in arrivals and approach type of controlling, and also in the oceanic areas as well. So you can move around, and you don't just have to work one piece of airspace for your entire life. Some people like doing that, but other people like a bit of diversification, which I do. And it works different skills, those different types of areas. But on top of that, I was also fortunate enough to be able to use my business degree skills, and I worked on an international task force implementing new procedures in airspace in Australia that complemented what was happening around the world. So all of the country got together, decided we were going to be making these particular changes. We had to, I had to project manage the changes, to develop the procedures, develop the training and all that sort of stuff, so that we were all implementing the same rules on the same day at the same time. So that was a fabulous challenge, and really enjoyed doing it. The reason I'm here in Frankfurt is I decided that I don't want to do shift work anymore. And so now I have the privilege of training the next generation of controllers, which is great fun too. So, yeah, that was my journey. So factors that I considered when I was a young person as I decided to study. I did what I wanted. I did what I enjoyed. Yeah, most of the time. Yeah. So my educational experience, it was a tough process when I was doing my business degree because it wasn't my forte. A lot of the time I did not enjoy it, but I was absolutely determined that I was getting that piece of paper. So, and it stood me in good stead for when I did these other particular projects as a controller. One of the primary things that I'm very thankful for is the ability to write a report, develop an idea and convince other people on why that idea is a good idea, yeah, in writing. So I'm very thankful for having done that business degree, even though I didn't technically use it. Did I change my mind? Yes. I'm very glad I did. Satisfied with my education? Absolutely. I grew up in a public school and went to university, and then the education as a controller, got paid for that part, which was really good. There were ups and downs. I did not get through university without any hiccups. I failed some subjects and all that sort of stuff, but I kept on going and got to the end and got through, which developed resilience.